Good afternoon and welcome to Bloomerang Academy. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Diana Otero and I am the Product Engagement Manager at Bloomerang. You might recognize me from attending our Bloomerang Academy classes or listening to our release and help videos. Today we're talking about Bloomerang plus Zapier, marketing automation with Mailchimp. I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Jessie Gilchrist. Jessie is a Zapier certified expert and Bloomerang integrations consultant at Sidekick Solutions. Sidekick Solutions is a Bloomerang partner specializing in system automations for Bloomerang. Sidekick Solutions has been a Bloomerang user since 2013 and most recently was part of the Bloomerang team that launched the Bloomerang Zapier app, which is a key component of today's webinar. We're very excited to have Jessie here today to share her expertise and explore how you can use the Bloomerang Zapier app with Mailchimp to automate your marketing efforts. Thanks for being here, Jessie. Welcome.
Thanks, Diana, and thank you everyone for hopping on this webinar today. So the goal of today's webinar is to show you how a Bloomerang integration with Zapier and workflow automation with Mailchimp can be an integral part of your fundraising efforts. So today we are going to start by highlighting the benefits of Bloomerang's native Mailchimp integration. Then we're going to talk about Bloomerang and Zapier, how they work together and why Zapier integrations are a key feature of your Bloomerang system and fundraising strategy. And then we're going to explore and demonstrate how you can use the Bloomerang Zapier app to segment donors in your Mailchimp audience with tagging, and then also automate emails using Mailchimp custom events. So we will have demonstrations throughout the webinar to show you how to set up these automations for your organization. And as Diana mentioned, feel free to submit any questions during the presentation. We do have a couple of breaks built in to answer questions, and then I will open up for more questions at the end. So let's go ahead and dive on in. So we want to start with a quick poll to see how many of you are currently using Bloomerang's native integration with Mailchimp. So let us know if you're currently using that existing integration with Mailchimp and Bloomerang, if you plan to use it soon, if you've heard of it but don't plan to use it, or if this is the first time that you've heard of it.
Thanks, Jessie, and thanks, everyone. We have 2 people who raised their hand, as well as people who have said that they are about to start using Mailchimp. From the poll, it looks like 64% don't use it yet, but plan to use it soon.
Perfect. Great. Okay. So really appreciate that feedback. And while the focus of our webinar today is on integrations between Bloomerang and Mailchimp using Zapier, at Sidekick, we always recommend native integrations as your first option before proceeding to automated workflows with Zapier. And the native integration of Bloomerang is a solution you can implement today as part of your fundraising strategy and requires minimal setup. So since we have a few of you that are new to Bloomerang's native Mailchimp integration, we're going to start with a high-level overview of this key, or of the native integration's key functionality. And the really important thing to know is that Bloomerang's native Mailchimp integration allows for data to flow in both directions. So data can flow from Bloomerang to Mailchimp and from Mailchimp back to Bloomerang. So let's start by talking about how the native integration can sync your data from Bloomerang to Mailchimp. So first off, you can build templates of constituents in Bloomerang and push them to an audience in Mailchimp. All of your fundraising data lives in Bloomerang and can be used to segment your constituents before pushing them to Mailchimp for a targeted email campaign. You can also map Bloomerang constituent data to merge fields, which operate like custom fields in Mailchimp. This includes standard and custom fields on the constituent profile, as well as giving history information such as lifetime revenue, first transaction date and amount, and latest transaction date and amount. When you sync a template of constituents from Bloomerang to Mailchimp, it'll also create a unique tag in Mailchimp for each template that you send over. This allows for really easy segmentation in your Mailchimp audience. And then you can also add subscribers to Mailchimp groups based on the email interests in Bloomerang. And that's really just the functionality for syncing data from Bloomerang to Mailchimp. As I mentioned, the native integration also allows for data to flow from Mailchimp back to Bloomerang for subscribers who were synced to Mailchimp as part of one of your template syncs. So for subscribers who are sent to Mailchimp through a Bloomerang template, the integration will also update their email interest in Bloomerang based on changes to their group preferences in Mailchimp. It will update their Bloomerang email interest to opt it out if they unsubscribed through a Mailchimp email campaign that's built from one of those templates that you've pushed. And then we'll also create interactions on the constituents timeline with open and click data for email campaigns sent using that unique tag that's created for each Bloomerang template sync. So there's a lot of great options for how you can sync data back and forth between Bloomerang and Mailchimp with the native integration. If you'd like more information on how to set up the Bloomerang native Mailchimp integration and configure constituent templates, the best place to go is the Bloomerang knowledge base in their YouTube channel. Diana just went ahead and shared some information in the chat, but she's shared links to the Bloomerang intermediate class on Bloomerang emails and the native Mailchimp integration. Go ahead and copy that link to view the recording later. I really recommend watching it if you're interested in setting up the native Mailchimp integration, as it walks you through the whole process. So before we move on to how you can automate your marketing efforts further with the Bloomerang Zapier app, I do want to take a quick pause here to see if we have any questions about Bloomerang's native Mailchimp integration. So Diana, if we had any questions come in about the native integration?
None so far.
Perfect. We'll keep going on through then. We've got lots to cover today, so not a problem if we don't have questions yet. So let's go ahead and move on to our next poll. So now we're going to be shifting our focus to talking about how we can use Bloomerang and Zapier to automate marketing through Mailchimp. So let us know if you are currently using Zapier, and if you are using Zapier, if you're using it with Bloomerang. Or you can also let us know that you are not using Zapier, or maybe you've never heard of Zapier before.
Thanks, Jessie, and thanks, everyone. It looks like 56% have heard of Zapier before, but have never used it. 36% have not heard of Zapier before, while 7% are already using Zapier with Bloomerang.
Perfect. Great. Looks like we've got kind of a mix there. But since we have a few of you that are new to Zapier, let's start with a really quick high-level overview of what Zapier is and why we believe it's a key feature of your Bloomerang system and fundraising strategy. So you might be wondering when we're talking, or why we are talking about Zapier when the presentation is really about Bloomerang and Mailchimp. And it's a fair question that offers an exciting answer. Zapier-enabled integration between Bloomerang and Mailchimp can supplement Bloomerang's native Mailchimp integration and provide you with additional functionality and marketing opportunities for marketing automation, workflow and drip campaigns, and automated list building. So Zapier is the software that enables additional Bloomerang integration for your fundraising opportunities. It's a middleware that sits between your Bloomerang database and other apps like Mailchimp, helping them talk to each other. At its core, Zapier is automation software. And with Zapier, you can build one integration or many, automating hundreds of tasks around your Bloomerang system within a single platform. So you might be wondering why I get so excited in talking about Bloomerang and Zapier integrations. And there's three primary reasons why we at Sidekick and why Bloomerang as well gets excited about these opportunities. First and most important, Zapier connects to over 2,000 other applications. Any app in Zapier's directory can be connected to Bloomerang. And so essentially, if it's on Zapier's list, it can be integrated with Bloomerang, and that includes Mailchimp. So if you go to zapier.com/apps, right here, you can get rid of the rest of the part of that URL, but if you go to zapier.com/apps, it's going to take you to this directory where you can search through the list of over 2,000 applications they have. You can search for a specific app. Again, you can see right here that Bloomerang's in there. or you can even look through the different app categories to find the application that you're looking for. And Diana just went ahead and shared this link in the chat, so go ahead and copy that if you want to use that in the future to see if the applications your organization are using or is using can be integrated with Bloomerang. So the second reason we get so excited about Bloomerang and Zapier integrations is that Zapier was designed for anyone to build automations. You don't need to know how to code to build Zaps. Anyone can build and maintain a Zap, and we're going to walk through some builds today so you can get a feel for what that looks like. And then in that build process is that Zapier enables custom integrations. So you aren't limited to a one-size-fits-all workflow, mapping, or formatting. You really can build the integration and the mapping in a way that fits your organization's use case, your workflows, and truly meets your needs. So it's not just something out of the box that you have to fit your workflow into. You really can customize and design that to meet your needs. So now let's dive into how you can use Zapier to automate workflows between Bloomerang and Mailchimp. So one of the primary use cases for Bloomerang Zapier app to integrate with Mailchimp is an automated sync. And in its simplest form, an automated sync can add and update subscribers in Mailchimp for newly created or updated constituents in Bloomerang. Now, we are actually going to take this use case a step further today by demonstrating an automated sync paired with tagging for fundraising activity, because this is going to allow us to create easy segments in our Mailchimp audience. So we are going to focus on a sync of Bloomerang donors with tagging based on the constituent's giving focus. For each new transaction in Bloomerang, for constituents who have an email address and who are not opted out, the integration is going to first add or update the subscriber in Mailchimp before looking up the tag ID for the Bloomerang campaign and adding the tag to that subscriber in Mailchimp. Adding a tag in Mailchimp for each campaign a constituent gives to supports your fundraising efforts by allowing you to segment your Mailchimp audience easily for targeted solicitations based on past giving. So let's go hop into Zapier and actually walk through how we could set this up. So I'm logged in here in my Zapier database or Zapier platform, and I'm going to click Make a Zap. And so Zaps and Zapier start with a trigger, which is an event that happens in one app. So in this workflow, we are going to start with a new transaction in Bloomerang. That's our trigger. Now in our new transaction trigger, Bloomerang gives us the option to filter what types of transactions we want to actually trigger our integration for. And so I'm going to set my transaction types to only those that actually have revenue. So I'm going to select donation, recurring donation payment, and then pledge payment, because I only want to pass through and sync constituents when they have a donation or a transaction that has revenue associated with it. And then I'm also going to include a minimum amount of 1 penny to make sure that any in-kind donations that are entered with a $0 amount or any other type of $0 transaction entered in our system doesn't send through to Mailchimp as well. I really just want to see those constituents sync to Mailchimp and that giving focus sync when there actually is revenue associated with that transaction. Now, later in the workflow, we're actually going to map the constituent's giving history to merge fields in Mailchimp. So we need to set the constituent's cumulative giving history field to true so that it'll include this data when it sends through the transaction and constituent information from Bloomerang for each new transaction. It's also going to send us that cumulative giving history data as well. We can leave the household information field blank as we don't need this information in our workflow. So the next step is to test our trigger and generate sample data. So this will return recently created transactions that meet our criteria. And these are samples only and will not run through the integration because they were created before the integration was turned on. We want to make sure we select a sample that has a campaign value assigned, as we need this field in the transaction to set up our mapping. So you can see right here, I have a few sample transactions to choose from. We can go with this first sample right here because it has a campaign assigned. So I'm going to go ahead and click continue. Now the next step that we want to do is we want to add a filter. And the reason why we want to add a filter is because we only want our Zap or our workflow to continue if, one, the primary email exists on the constituent's profile and the constituent is not opted out. So we're going to go ahead and look up the constituent's primary email. So I'm going here, and on the left, I'm choosing the field from Bloomerang. So you can see I actually typed in email. So it's pulling this information from our trigger from that new transaction, that sample transaction we pulled in. So I'm going to choose the email. And for the condition, I'm going to say that it exists because we only want to continue in this if the primary email exists. And then I'm going to click and to add an additional piece of criteria. So not only does the primary email need to exist, but we also want to make sure that the email interest, right here, so the custom email interest, email interest type, sorry about that, does not contain, and then we're going to put opted out. So the way that it comes through if a constituent is opted out of emails in Bloomerang is that email interest type field right here, where right now it's showing that this constituent is has selected all email interest types. If they've opted out, it actually will say opted out, and it's included in there as a essentially single word with no spacing, and the first letter of each word is capitalized. So we want to make sure that we match that here so that our filter works appropriately. So if we test our filter and I click continue, it should say that this sample transaction would have passed through our workflow because the primary email does exist and the constituent is not opted out. And so you can see that our test returns that this would have been successful and would have continued to our next step. So the next step, once we have our filter, so we've triggered on a new transaction, we're only going to continue if the constituent has an email and they are also not opted out of communications. The next step we're going to do is we're going to add our first Mailchimp step. And the first thing we're going to do is we are going to add or update that subscriber. So I'm going to choose my action event of add or update subscriber, select my Mailchimp account, and then we'll move through the steps to customize how we want to add or update that subscriber. So we're going to select our audience. And then we're going to go through and we're going to map our fields from our new transaction trigger. So we want our primary email from our constituent. And we want to make sure that the update existing is set to yes, so that if it finds a subscriber with this email in our database, it's going to go ahead and update the rest of the information down here, these merge fields we're about to get to, that it'll update that subscriber's record in Mailchimp if it matches. So when we scroll down here, you'll see that starting with first name, we get into the different merge fields that are available in Mailchimp. So I'm going to go ahead and start mapping in the fields from our new transaction trigger for that constituent. And you can see that it operates very similar to a mail merge. It's a really kind of similar field to that in terms of selecting a field or fields to then populate into that corresponding field in Mailchimp. So we can go through, we can map the address if we want. We can map a phone number, a birth date. At Sidekick Solutions, we recommend you also map what the Bloomerang account number, as well as what's called the account ID. And the reason why we recommend mapping these two fields is that, one, if you ever want to do an export from Mailchimp back into Bloomerang, that having that account number field on the subscriber record is going to make that a lot easier. Or if you want to automate anything passing from Mailchimp back to Bloomerang, this account ID is essentially a unique number per account in Bloomerang. So similar to how the account number works, but this is used in the API for Bloomerang. So this is kind of consider it like an account number that's used for integrations. So we recommend setting up merge fields in Mailchimp so that you can map the account number and the constituent ID at a minimum so you get that information in there. Now, from those cumulative giving fields that we had talked about, we can map in our lifetime revenue. And I'm going to map in the latest transaction date and latest transaction amount. Because we want to use these, we can use these in Mailchimp, again, to create additional segments. Maybe we want to target constituents who haven't given in the last year. We can use this date and amount field to create that list in Mailchimp. So again, just some best practice fields to include in there. This transaction amount. So you can see that I've mapped those in. These major donation ones we'll get to in our next workflow we're going to demonstrate, but for right now, I'm going to leave those blank. So once we've mapped the appropriate fields for our step where we want to add or update the subscriber in Mailchimp, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to click continue. Now we don't need to test this step necessarily, but you absolutely could test this step. Similar to how we did in our filter, we click test and review. And it just gives you a confirmation that your test was successful, lets you know if it created or updated a subscriber. So you can make sure that your data is flowing correctly through to Mailchimp, and then you can go to your Mailchimp account and make sure that that new subscriber it created, all of the mapping and to the different merge fields that you'd set up all went through successfully. So if you remember when we talked about our workflow here, our first step was to add or update a subscriber. And then we want to add a tag for the campaign on that donation. Now, because campaign is not a required field in Bloomerang, the next thing we want to do is we actually want to add a filter. Because if we try to add a tag for the campaign and there is no campaign on that transaction, we'll get an error in Zapier. So similar to the filter we did right here, we're just going to come in and we're going to add another filter. And in this case, we're going to choose campaign. And we're going to say that the campaign, so you can see from that new transactions in Bloomerang, I just typed in campaign and found the designations campaign name for that transaction. And for the logical condition, we're going to say exists. So we only want to continue if there is a campaign on the transaction. And you can see when I test it, it confirms that the Zap would have continued because there is a campaign on this donation that we chose as our test. Now, when adding a subscriber to a tag in Mailchimp, Zapier requires that we assign the tag using a unique ID number for each Mailchimp tag, not the text value. So to convert the Bloomerang campaign to the Mailchimp tag ID, we're going to use a lookup table. And so we're going to use the Formatter by Zapier. So it's an application that's available in Zapier. It's called Formatter. For our action event, we're going to choose utilities. And then it has an option in here for a lookup table. Right here. So what we'll do is for our lookup key, this is where we're going to map the campaign from our new transaction trigger. So the campaign name. And then below is where we'll put our lookup table. So in our lookup table on the left is going to be our Bloomerang campaign value. So we're going to call this our 2020 annual celebration breakfast. And we would continue down and we'd create a row for every campaign that is in our Bloomerang database that's active. So 2020 annual campaign, 2020 capital campaign. See, in our database, we have a 2020 gala, 2020 virtual wine tasting. And then let's say that we have some recurring gifts. So we're going to put in our 2019 annual campaign. And we tend to have recurring gifts from our past ones or past annual campaigns. So I'm going to make sure that those are in here. Okay. So on the left-hand side, so while we're saying, okay, we're going to look up the campaign from our new transaction that triggered our workflow, we're going to look it up in the column on the left. And then on the right is where we will enter the tag ID for the Mailchimp tag. So in order to pull the ID for the corresponding tag in Mailchimp, I'm going to click continue. We will come back to this lookup step, but in order to pull that ID number, we're going to add what our subsequent step will be, which is a Mailchimp step. Oops. There we go. And our action event will be to add subscriber to tag. Select my Mailchimp account. Okay. And you'll see that on this action that we're going to use to add a subscriber to a tag, there's a drop-down field here where it's going to list every tag. Oops. Looks like Mailchimp might be having some problems here. Well, just to give you an example of what it should be, in the tag, in this drop-down field, it should show every tag that's available in our Mailchimp database. And below that tag, it will have in gray an ID number showing what that corresponding tag is, or essentially the ID number for that tag. So Mailchimp appears to be having some connection issues right now. So I apologize for that. That makes it a little bit difficult to showcase this here. I actually believe I have a screenshot. Let me see here. Yep, so it's a little small, but you can see right here, here's a screenshot where it's showing the tags that are in my Mailchimp database. And then there's a unique ID number below each tag. And so that is what we would want to use in our lookup table. So we'd have our Bloomerang campaigns on the left in our lookup table. Then we populate in those Mailchimp tag IDs that we're pulling from that drop-down menu. So I actually have open on my other screen the corresponding tag IDs for these. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of that. And I'm going to populate some of these in here just so you can see. So I pre-pulled these for our Mailchimp sandbox that we use. Apologize, it's going to keep popping up this arrow over here. You can just ignore that. But you can see I would just type in the different ID numbers for the tag, corresponding tag that I want to assign in Mailchimp. Now in Mailchimp, in our sandbox that we're using, we don't have a different tag for every annual campaign. We actually just have a single annual campaign tag. It's not year specific. So this ID number that I've applied up here for the 2020 annual campaign, I'm going to actually want to assign that same tag in Mailchimp for these other campaigns. So I could just put the same tag ID in there. And then I have my gala and my virtual wine tasting. So you can see that when your lookup table is populated, it's going to confirm that you are looking up the campaign name from your transaction. It's going to look up in the column on the left, which is all your Bloomerang campaigns. And then on the right is going to have your IDs for those different tags. So once we've gone ahead and done this, we want to test this step because we want to make sure that we get the output from that lookup. So when I click test and review, again, it's going to look up the campaign using that lookup table, and the output it's going to give me is the corresponding ID for the campaign that was on our transaction that triggered our workflow. So once we have that output, I can click done editing. And then we can go then to our add subscriber to tag in Mailchimp. And we're actually going to set up this now where we're going to select our audience. Oh, and that's actually probably why it wasn't pulling my tag list in, because I hadn't selected my audience yet. You can see now, there we go. Yep, so once we pull our audience in, then it's going to populate our tags. So here you can see that example of the tag ID numbers underneath each tag value. But to make this a dynamic lookup where it's going to assign the tag based off of the conversion in that prior lookup table, we actually want to choose custom instead of choosing one of the tags from the drop-down menu. And then for that lookup step, we're going to choose that output. So that converted value following that output, which is going to be that tag ID. And then again, we're going to populate in the primary email for our constituent for that transaction. So at this point, you'd be able to turn your Zap on and start testing. So let's go ahead and show how this works in real time. So I'm going to hop over to Bloomerang, and we are going to open up a constituent, and we are going to enter a new donation. So we're going to go to the timeline, and we're going to add a new donation for Sherlock. And we are going to add just a $10 donation to our unrestricted fund. We're going to say the campaign is the 2020 annual campaign. I'm going to say this was an online donation. I'm going to say it's method of cash. And again, just populating some information in here so we can show how this works. So when I click save, now when we go over to our Mailchimp database, if I refresh my Mailchimp database here, see, it might still be syncing through. Let me look over here on my side. It can take a couple of seconds for that data to sync through, but it updates relatively quickly. The Bloomerang triggers work really quickly to sync that data over to your database. Okay, it looks like, let me go in here. Okay, so I think it's gone through now. So let's go ahead and refresh this. There we go. So you can see right here, we have Sherlock Gilchrist. In the Zap that I had set up that was live, I actually had mapped in the address and the phone number as well. So you can see that information on the subscriber record. You can see we have our Bloomerang account number, that constituent or that account ID, which is that unique ID number that's more useful sometimes for custom integration work. So again, we recommend populating or mapping that into a merge field as well. We have the lifetime revenue amount, the latest transaction date, and the latest transaction amount. So that $10 donation that we just submitted. And then we have our tag here for the annual campaign, which is the campaign that was on that donation. That's the corresponding tag that should have been assigned. So you can see how easily it just updated that subscriber record with that most recent information. So adding tags and updating merge fields in Mailchimp is one of the easiest ways to create segments for targeted email campaigns. So the next thing we want to do is that we actually want to set up a new segment in Mailchimp for our campaign tags. So let's say for our events. So if I click on segments in Mailchimp and click create segment, I'm going to show you how easy it is to create a segment based off of those tags for the different campaigns or giving focuses that a donor could have. So what we want to do, we want contacts that match any of the following conditions. And we're just going to start adding our conditions for different tags. So we're going to say that the subscriber has a tag right down here, tag that is, let's say, our annual celebration breakfast, or a tag that is for our gala, or our virtual wine tasting. So we're essentially going to pull in any subscribers that have had past giving to one of our events. So this allows us to kind of build an event segment. So if we want to target subscribers who have given to an event or attended an event, purchased a ticket, really any type of financial transaction related to an event, it's going to pull them into this segment based off of them being tagged with these tags when those transactions have been entered in Bloomerang. So if I click preview segment, you can see that it's going to build my list here of my contacts in my database, because all of them have, in addition to other tags they may have, they all have a tag, at least one tag for one of the events that I pulled into that segment criteria. So we now could go ahead and use this segment to send a targeted solicitation from Mailchimp. So before we move on to our next use case, want to check in real quick, Diana, and see if we have any questions that have come through.
No questions at the moment. But if anyone thinks of questions later, you can always put them in the chat or send them in an email. Thanks.
Perfect. Sounds great. So let's dive into our next use case. So the use cases for segmentation in Mailchimp are nearly endless, but Mailchimp's ability to support fundraising efforts doesn't stop there. Instead of merely segmenting subscribers, you can take advantage of Mailchimp's automation functionality to trigger an email or an email series based on subscriber activity. So Mailchimp's automation tool can trigger an email when a subscriber is tagged, when they add a new group in your audience, when a date-based merge field meets certain criteria. So again, that latest transaction date. Let's say we wanted to set it that if it's more than 365 days ago, it triggers a lapsed donor targeted email. Or we can trigger when a specific event is added to a subscriber. And so we're going to focus on this last use case, which is this Mailchimp specific event feature that it has, as this is a really powerful tool for different types of events that may happen in your Bloomerang database. So events in Mailchimp are similar to timeline activity in Bloomerang and are used to log certain activities the subscriber has with your organization. So different events on a subscriber's record in Mailchimp can trigger different automated emails or email series. The workflow we're going to showcase will create a custom event on the subscriber in Mailchimp when a major donation is received. And this event is going to trigger an automated email to the subscriber, recognizing the major gift and illustrating the impact of this donation to the organization. So you can see here that we're going to set up our trigger to only fire when a transaction is received that's greater than $5,000. Now you can set that criteria, whatever your organization considers a major donation. We're going to have a similar filter. We're going to add and update our subscriber, and then we're going to create a custom event in Mailchimp. So it's a shorter workflow, but a really powerful one. So let's hop back into Zapier and show how to set this Zap up. So we're going to hop back into Zapier. And similar to how we did before, I'm going to click Make a Zap. And similar to the last workflow, we are going to start with Bloomerang's new transaction trigger. So selecting the new transaction is our trigger event, our Bloomerang account. And then we're going to set up the filters relatively the same way. So the types of transactions, again, I'm going to select are those that have revenue associated with them. Now, again, if you want to consider a pledge instead of a pledge payment as a major donation, you could switch this transaction type here. And then I'm going to set my minimum amount to $5,000 because I only want to trigger or fire this workflow if a donor makes a donation that is $5,000 or more. And then similar to the last one, I'm going to include the cumulative giving history, and I'm going to leave the household information field blank as we don't need this in our workflow. Now, you probably noticed that the only difference here in these filters between the last workflow and this one is this minimum transaction amount. So it's important to note that if this workflow is set up in conjunction with the earlier sync of donors that we demonstrated, the major donation will actually trigger both workflows. So just important to note that there may be some overlap in the two demonstrations we've had today. So if you want to implement both, just be aware that your donation likely will trigger both workflows if it's a major donation. So we're going to click continue. And then same as we did before, we're going to test our trigger to pull in a sample transaction. You can see it pulled one in here. So we're going to go ahead and click continue. Again, it returns usually 3 that you can choose from. So you can always look through if you want to find one that you prefer over the other. But it really just helps, again, with setting up that mapping to have that sample transaction. Now, once we've selected our transaction, we're going to do the same filter step that we did in the last one. So we're going to say that the email for the primary email exists, and that the email interest type is not opted out. So again, we only want to continue if that donor who made the major donation has an email and they are not opted out of communications. And you can see that this one would not have continued because for this constituent, let me pull up the email interest type. Oh, whoops, sorry. This should be contains. Sorry, I set up my filter logic wrong. Oh, it's not liking me. It's not exactly match. Okay. There we go. Sorry about that. So yes, so sorry, email exists, and then the email interest type does not match opted out. So that's our criteria to make sure that we're only continuing on in this workflow if the constituent has an email and is still signed up for email or receiving email communications from your organization. So same as we did in the last workflow, our next step is going to be to add or update the subscriber in Mailchimp. So similar to what we did before, it's the same add or update subscriber action. Select our Mailchimp account. Going to select our audience. Map in our email for our constituent. Again, make sure update existing is set to yes. And then we can merge into all of our same fields as we did before. First name, last name. Again, address, phone, optional if you'd like to include those. We'll map in the account number. We'll map in that account ID. Again, because we pulled in those cumulative giving fields, we can pull in the lifetime revenue, the latest transaction date, and the latest transaction amount. And then this is where those other two merge fields I mentioned before come in, which is the latest major donation date and the latest major donation amount. So in addition to tracking the donor's just most recent transaction, we can also pull in and map separately the most recent major donation. So in this case, we are actually just going to pull the date from the transaction. So not from the cumulative giving history, but for this transaction that's triggering the workflow, we're going to pull in the date. And then we're going to pull in the amount. Now, when this workflow triggers, it's likely, or it should happen, that the latest transaction date and amount will match the latest major donation date and amount. But if you're running our earlier workflow simultaneously, if the donor makes additional donations after the major donation, these major donation fields will remain static until another major donation is made. But these latest transaction date and amount may change and update if they make additional donations under that $5,000 threshold. So you can see how having these separate custom field or merge field sets is useful to track overall latest transaction date and amount, as well as those that are for major donations. So I'm going to go ahead and click continue. And once we've gone ahead and add or updated our subscriber, again, we can test this again. Then the next step we want to do is we're actually going to add another Mailchimp step. And this is to create that custom event. So in our action event, this time we're going to choose create custom event. Now our audience, same as before, again, some similarities with these Mailchimp actions where we select our audience and we map in our email for our subscriber. And then we get to the fields for this custom event. And so we want to set our custom event name. We are actually going to set this to major_donation. And we can set our property. So any additional information we want to include in this event. So we're going to include date. And again, I'm going to map in the date from that transaction. And then we can also include amount. And I'm going to map in the amount from our transaction that triggered the workflow. Now, At that point, our workflow is set up and we can go ahead and turn it on and sync that information through to Mailchimp. Now again, let's go ahead and test this in real time. So I'm going to hop back over to Sherlock, and you can see right now that you can see, whoops, sorry, in the timeline, you can see that $10 donation we entered. So let's enter a new donation, and let's make this one a let's say a $6,000 donation. This is going to go to our, say, temporary restricted. It's going to be for our capital campaign, personal solicitation. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and click save. So you can see we now have that $6,000 donation on Sherlock's timeline. And when we go back over to Mailchimp, if I refresh, give it a second here, it looks like it's still syncing through. Again, relatively real time, about as fast as we can get, but sometimes does take a couple of seconds for that to go. So we'll go ahead and refresh here and then go to our contacts page. And let's actually go to view all contacts. Oh, let's see, it's not letting me. Oh, there we go. So you can see here we have Sherlock's record. And if we scroll over, you can see the lifetime revenue is updated. The latest transaction date and amount now reflects that $6,000 donation. And then the latest major donation date and amount updated as well. So all those merge fields updated. And then if we open up Sherlock's subscriber record, you can see on the activity feed that now it has this activity for that custom event we created. That's that major donation. And it shows that donation amount and the donation date. So populates right in there for us. Now, once we've set up our integration to create a custom event for major donation activity, we're ready to set up our Mailchimp automation. Now, we could create a segment for subscribers with a major donation event. So similar to what we did before, we could just create a segment here and set our criteria for our segment to be for this, it's down here under custom engagement. And we could, major gift donation is the one that I had set up, and you would say that it has occurred. And so, or any of these other criteria, you could select date ranges for that as well. But essentially we could create a segment to pull in those contacts who have had that custom event on their subscriber. But we want to show you how you can set up an automated email to trigger when that major donation event is added to the subscriber. So instead of creating a segment, we're actually going to go to this automations page in Mailchimp. And we're going to go ahead and click customer journey. Actually, sorry. We're actually going to come down here to category. Sorry, Mailchimp changed their interface in the last couple of weeks, so I'm still getting used to it. So automations. And then under here where it says category under featured, we are actually going to go to API and integrations. And then we are going to select the behavior-based automations right here. And you can see that it pops open for that event. And we're going to set our campaign name. So we're going to call this Major Donor Automated Email. And we're going to click Begin. So it's going to take us to the Mailchimp email campaign setup page. And so we're going to, first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to edit the trigger that would trigger this automation. So we're going to click Edit. And this is where we would enter the event name the same way we had entered it in our Zap. So if you remember, we entered this right here as major_donation. So we're going to enter the event name the same day here. And we can set a delay if we want as well. So we could wait 1 day to start our email. We could send it immediately. We could wait multiple days, hours, or weeks. So you can really design how soon after that major donation is made you want to send your automated email or kick off your email series. Now you can choose additional filters or segments. to filter who gets this email by as well. So you can go ahead and customize that as you want. For example, you may have different email content you'd want to send for major donors to your annual campaign versus to your capital campaign. And so by adding additional segmentation criteria, you can have separate automated emails for these major donor categories. Now, once our trigger is configured, we'd click Design Email to customize and design our email. Now, we're not going to go through the full design of an email template in our demonstration today, as we only have so much time. But just know that once you've designed your email, you can go ahead and click Next to confirm your setup of that automation. And then once new donations start coming in, it'll start triggering that email in Mailchimp. So you may be curious about other scenarios where using Mailchimp events to trigger an automated email or a drip campaign could be implemented. So here are some other examples. You could use automation for new donors, to target constituents who donated to a specific campaign, to target constituents who are assigned to a primary solicitor, constituents who've registered or attended a class or event, or when a constituent volunteers. So these examples are really just the tip of the iceberg. And we encourage you to think about events specific to your organization where an automated email or email series would strengthen your fundraising efforts. And using that event feature in Mailchimp makes it really easy to set up that automation and trigger emails or email series based off of that activity. So to kind of bring our presentation today and what we've been talking about full circle, I want to leave you with a few thoughts on the power of Bloomerang integrations with Mailchimp. So we believe that Bloomerang is your central system for donor and fundraising activity. Whether your organization pursues the native Mailchimp integration or automations using Zapier, start from the lens that Bloomerang is the core of your donor management and fundraising technology. Integration should support your Bloomerang database. They don't replace it. And as we mentioned earlier, we recommend native integrations as your first option before proceeding to automated workflows with Zapier. You're going to want to look to Zapier for advanced workflows and additional automation opportunities, but the native integration with Mailchimp is a great place to start. By harnessing the power of Bloomerang's native Mailchimp integration and automation with Zapier, you can segment your subscribers with ease, create targeted campaigns to support your cultivation efforts, and save time by tapping into Mailchimp's automation features. And so the next step is really getting started. So first, link your Mailchimp account to Bloomerang and begin creating templates for targeted email campaigns using Bloomerang's native integration. If you have a need for an advanced automation, sign up for a Zapier account to automate your Mailchimp integration. There are free trials with Zapier, and nonprofits get a discount. Once you've set up Zapier, you can connect your Bloomerang and Mailchimp accounts and set up simple zaps to build your comfort and confidence in your workflow. Turn them on, watch them run, and high five yourself for your success. I appreciate the time that you've taken today to watch this webinar. I hope it was useful for you and gives you some ideas about how you can automate your marketing efforts. Again, my name is Jessie Gilchrist, and my email is listed here. Our door at Sidekick Solutions is truly always open. If you'd like to work with a consultant to set up Zaps or develop a custom Bloomerang integration to address a unique use case, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm going to hand it off to Diana for a quick poll before we open up for more questions. But thank you so much for attending today. It's been a pleasure sharing these automation opportunities with you. But if you have questions, again, please reach out to us at Sidekick Solutions. We're happy to talk through your use case and what's possible with Bloomerang and Zapier, as well as automating Bloomerang with Mailchimp.
Thank you so much, Jessie, and thank you everyone for being here today. That was a lot of wonderful information. I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. Please let us know if you would like someone to reach out for consulting services to get you set up with Bloomerang and Zapier. That could be with Mailchimp or another integration that you're using. If so, let us know. In the meantime, thanks again, Jesse. That was a lot of great information. We did get a question early on about the native integration with Mailchimp and the extended functionality through Zapier. So Bloomerang does have a native integration with Mailchimp, and I've included the help materials in the chat, but we're very excited about the extended capabilities with or through Zapier as well. So they're not mutually exclusive. If you're already using Mailchimp, you can use the native integration. You can also use Zapier to extend that functionality. Jesse, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. What's your favorite kind of use case for marketing or marketing automation through Mailchimp?
Absolutely. It's such a hard question. I'm not going to lie. At Sidekick, we automate as much as we can. So we try to pass that along to the organizations that we work with as well, because automation is the best way to free up time in your schedule. So when it comes to automations in Mailchimp, emails and email series are really the best way to use that functionality. And I think one of my favorites is triggering either a welcome email or a welcome email series for new donors. I think is a fantastic one, as well as having even just a single email that triggers and sends automatically for lapsed donors. So donors who haven't given within the last year or the last 2 years, whatever your criteria is for that. Those are two really easy ways to get started with automation in Mailchimp, is for your new donors and your lapsed donors. And those automations, can be set up modeling the workflows that we set up here today. So those are two of my favorites. They're ones that I hear clients all the time talk about, that they want to target new donors and lapsed donors. And so in terms of automation and kind of a set it and forget it type model, those two are absolutely my favorites, and I think can free up a lot of time for many organizations.
That's awesome. I love that idea. I hear the new donor or new constituent emails a lot, but I haven't heard a lot of people doing stuff for lapsed or lapsing donors. I love that idea, because you can start that email series before they lapse, catch them before they lapse. If you know you have constituents or donors lapsing in the next 60 or 30 days, you can start that process already, and you may already win them back before you have to do much more. Or you can handle that before you have to pick up the phone and get them or win them back.
Absolutely.
We also have a question here. Can I run a daily email to wish our donors happy birthdays using Mailchimp and Zapier?
Yeah, that's another great use case. And again, that's what I actually hear a lot too. So if you're tracking birthdays in Bloomerang with your sync that you have going from Bloomerang to Mailchimp using Zapier, you can map that birthday to a merge field on your Mailchimp subscriber profile, and then set up an automation that'll run based off of that birthday, again, triggering a happy birthday email. So that, again, is a really common one. And birthday is actually one of the kind of pre-built merge fields available in Mailchimp, because they see that for both the for-profit and nonprofit organizations that use their platform, that those birthday emails are often a really nice kind of personalized touch that's not necessarily solicitation based, but is more kind of that goodwill or just relationship building type automation. But absolutely, yes, there you can set up emails to trigger from Mailchimp to send automatically when it's someone's birthday. So that's another great use case, again, to save you time. So you can have that set up and automated, and you don't have to remember to send it or check every day to see if it's a constituent's birthday. It'll send those automatically.
That's awesome. Such a simple but highly effective way to keep your donors engaged and build that relationship with your donors. I love that too. Well, thank you everyone again for joining us today. As I said, I'm excited about what you all can do with this, and what you can do with the native Mailchimp integration and the extended capabilities through Zapier as well. We're very excited to see where all of you will take it. As Jesse mentioned, this is just the tip of the iceberg. So whatever you can imagine, you'll likely be able to do it with Zapier and Bloomerang and Mailchimp. We hope that you can find a way to automate your processes and build those relationships and focus on building those relationships as well. So thank you everyone again for being with us this afternoon. Thank you so much, Jessie, for all that wonderful information. And we hope we see everyone again in another Academy class soon. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye.